One innocent evening in a hot tub with my stepmother and her friends changed everything I thought I understood about boundaries, trust, and the treacherous, uncharted territories of my own heart. The crisp evening air, carrying the first hints of autumn, caressed my skin as I lingered in the sprawling backyard, adrift in a sea of contemplation. The soft, rhythmic murmur of the hot tub's jets created a calming ambience, a stark contrast to the peculiar stillness of the house. Typically, our home thrummed with energy, particularly when Diana, my stepmother, hosted one of her renowned gatherings for her circle of friends. Yet tonight, it was merely me, relishing a glass of expensive Chardonnay I had discreetly liberated from the fridge. I'm Miles, 22 years old, a recent college graduate currently residing in the familiar yet stifling comfort of my childhood home as I navigate the bewildering fog of my next steps. There are perks to this arrangement, like tranquil, solitary evenings such as this one, or so I believed. The gentle creak of the sliding glass door interrupted my reverie. I glanced over to witness Diana emerging onto the patio, flanked by a few of her closest friends, their soft, melodic laughter dancing on the air. They held drinks in their hands, radiating an unmistakable aura of carefree joy and feminine confidence. It wasn't long before they became aware of my solitary presence in the shadows. "Miles, what brings you out here all by your lonesome?" Diana called out, her voice laced with that familiar, warm playfulness that had become a comforting constant in my life over the past few years, ever since she married my often absent father. I shrugged, caught in a moment of uncertainty, my mind scrambling for a plausible reply. Company was the last thing I had anticipated, particularly not hers, not theirs. As they drew nearer, I observed that each of them was clad in a bikini beneath their flowing silk robes. It was evident they intended to indulge in the bubbling warmth of the hot tub. Aubrey, a sharp-witted redhead with eyes that seemed to see right through you, offered me a warm, inviting smile. "You really ought to join us," she proposed, her voice a playful, suggestive purr. Before I could stammer a polite refusal, Diana appeared at my side, deftly snatching the wine glass from my grasp with a practiced grace. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, glimmered with playful mischief as she urged, "Come on, don't be shy. The water's perfect." Tonight, I found myself caught in a complex web of conflicting emotions, a curious, unsettling blend of adolescent thrill and profound unease. The intensity of their collective gazes weighed heavily upon me, a tangible pressure that made it nearly impossible to utter a refusal. After a brief, silent moment of internal debate, I caught myself giving a small, almost imperceptible nod and rising to my feet. Aubrey and Diana's other companion, Tessa, a quiet blonde with a serene smile, giggled softly as they shed their robes with an easy, unself-conscious grace and stepped into the steaming water. Their laughter danced through the cool night air, a melody both infectious and impossibly inviting. I lingered at the precipice for a moment, the familiar, lingering sensation of being an outsider washing over me, a feeling Diana seemed to intuitively understand. "The water is fine, Miles," she said, her voice softer now, a playful wink accompanying her words. Unable to resist any longer, I stripped down to my swim trunks and stepped into the hot tub. The warm, swirling water enveloped me in a soothing, almost decadent embrace. As the weight of unacknowledged tension began to melt away from my shoulders, I found my place in the churning water, keenly, almost painfully, attuned to Diana's presence beside me. "Relax," Tessa said, her voice a gentle, calming balm. "We're all here to have a good time." Diana passed me another glass of wine, her fingers lingering against mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a small, subtle gesture that sent an unexpected jolt through my system. I couldn't tell if it was the disorienting warmth of the water, the insidious effects of the alcohol, or the delightful, overwhelming company of these beautiful, confident women, but a profound sense of ease, of surrender, began to wash over me. The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by easy laughter and playful splashes, yet beneath the surface of the light-hearted banter, a subtle undercurrent of tension tugged at my awareness. Every so often, I would catch a glimpse of it in a shared, knowing look between the three women, in a sentence left deliberately unfinished. As the minutes slipped away into the deepening night, I felt their collective gaze upon me, an expression I struggled to interpret. It was then that I noticed Diana inching closer, the movement almost imperceptible in the churning water. As she spoke, her shoulder would softly, accidentally, brush against mine. Her hand would occasionally find its way to rest on my arm as she emphasized a point, her touch light yet significant. I attempted to maintain an air of nonchalant ease, yet the rapid, frantic thumping of my heart against my ribs betrayed my calm facade. Across the tub, Aubrey and Tessa observed us, their smiles carrying a silent, enigmatic challenge that urged me to act, yet I remained motionless, uncertain of the direction this strange, intoxicating evening was taking. The atmosphere had shifted, charged with a palpable electric energy I couldn't quite name. Diana leaned in slightly, her presence growing more intense with each passing second, though neither of us spoke. A chill, completely at odds with the steaming water, coursed through me as I caught sight of Aubrey and Tessa inching nearer as well, their gazes now entwined in an unspoken conspiratorial connection. Aubrey smiled, her lips curling in a manner that sent a dizzying flutter through my stomach. The heady blend of the warm water, the wine, and their overwhelming proximity rendered everything blissfully, dangerously hazy. Diana leaned closer, her voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper, her words barely audible above the bubbling jets. "We were just talking about how lonely it must be for you here sometimes, with your father away so much." Her words, so simple, so seemingly innocent, landed with the weight of a profound truth I hadn't even fully admitted to myself. Aubrey and Tessa shared soft, sympathetic giggles. With each fleeting second, I sensed the tension escalating, as if the outside world had come to a complete standstill, leaving only the four of us in this steamy, intimate cocoon. Diana's hand trailed lightly, deliberately, down my arm, and the room's atmosphere seemed to thicken, to become heavy with unspoken invitations. It was clear something was shifting, though no one said it aloud. Aubrey and Tessa seemed to share a secret understanding with Diana, their laughter soft and inviting, their eyes holding a knowing glint. I couldn't think straight as Diana's next whisper hung in the charged air. The water swirled around us, warm and inviting, but the complex emotion building inside me was more intense than anything purely physical. Diana leaned in, a playful, almost predatory expression on her beautiful face. Aubrey and Tessa were close now, their presence surrounding me, a soft, fragrant wall of femininity. I turned my head slightly, and the moment felt heavy, momentous, yet frustratingly unclear. Something was changing, something fundamental, but I didn't know how far it would go. I lingered there as the night deepened, unsure of how to interpret the electric current running beneath each glance, each laugh, each fleeting touch. Aubrey leaned in close, her eyes searching mine as the moment grew heavier with unspoken energy. I didn't move. My thoughts were a chaotic, roaring cacophony, colliding with the charged stillness of the air around us. Tessa's fingers brushed lightly down my arm, a soft, almost imperceptible gesture that added to the mounting confusion within me. "You deserve to have some fun, Miles," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine with a question that had nothing to do with her words. My voice caught in my throat. I couldn't find the words to respond. All I could do was give another small, almost involuntary nod, my heart racing, my mind reeling. Our closeness deepened, not with declarations or decisions, but with a quiet, mutual acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted between us. The tension lingered, thick and palpable, as Diana placed her hand on my knee, her touch both maternal and something else entirely. We sat like that for a long, breathless moment, no words exchanged, just the oppressive warmth of the water and the dizzying uncertainty that hung between us. I purposefully shifted, my body suddenly feeling too large, too awkward. The water clung to my skin as I adjusted my position, breathing deep, unsure of whether to step away from the precipice or to lean into the fall. The night air was cool against my face, a stark contrast to the cloying heat of the hot tub. We stood quietly in the rising steam, the moment dense with an unresolved emotional tension. No one rushed to speak. Aubrey and Tessa remained nearby, their quiet, knowing glances telling me they understood this wasn't just casual company anymore. It was charged with something deeper, something forbidden. The night blurred into one long, surreal sequence of emotion, laughter, and a profound, unnerving closeness, hard to define and harder still to forget. What followed wasn't something I could easily put into words. It was a blur of sensations and moments, not rooted in explicit touch, but in a powerful, overwhelming emotional energy. The evening unfolded into something none of us had anticipated, layered with a strange, intoxicating intimacy and a startling shared discovery. We laughed, we talked, we floated in deep thought, and then, without a clear endpoint, without a definitive climax, the moment passed. Aubrey, Diana, and Tessa quietly rose from the water, wrapping themselves in plush white towels, their soft giggles trailing behind them as they disappeared back inside the house. Diana was the last to leave. She paused for a moment at the door, giving me one last, lingering look over her shoulder, her eyes shimmering with an emotion I couldn't decipher. "Miles," she said softly, my name a quiet question on her lips. Then she vanished into the house. I remained in the hot tub for a little longer, allowing the warm, churning water to soothe my jangled nerves. My heart was still racing, but a strange sense of calm, of finality, had settled over me. The night had been unexpectedly intense, profoundly confusing, and utterly unforgettable. As I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, I couldn't help but smile to myself. Things would never be the same after tonight, and I found myself both terrified and strangely, exhilaratingly excited about what the future might hold. Little did I know this was only the beginning of a summer that would change everything. The next morning, I awoke with a slight, throbbing headache and a flood of vivid, disjointed memories from the night before. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if it had all been a strange, alcohol-fueled dream. The hot tub, Diana, Aubrey, and Tessa. It all seemed too surreal, too far outside the bounds of my normal, predictable existence. But as I became more alert, as the hazy images sharpened into focus, I knew it had been real. Very real. The house was quiet. As I made my way downstairs, I half expected to find Diana in the kitchen, but it was empty. A note on the counter caught my eye. "Out for brunch with the girls. Be back later." I breathed a sigh of relief. I wasn't quite ready to face her yet. I needed time to process everything that had happened, to try and make sense of the chaotic storm of my own feelings. As I sipped my coffee, my mind wandered back to the events of the previous night. The way Diana had looked at me, her gaze a potent mix of affection and something I couldn't or wouldn't name. The feeling of Aubrey's sharp, intelligent glance. Tessa's soft, encouraging voice. It was all so vivid, so seared into my memory. But now, In the harsh, unforgiving light of day, a sharp twinge of guilt, of shame, began to prick at me. Diana was my stepmother, for God's sake, and Aubrey and Tessa were her friends. What in the world had I gotten myself into? The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my spiraling thoughts. Diana walked in, looking fresh and relaxed from her brunch, a light scarf draped around her neck. When she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, she smiled. But I could see something else in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, a hint of nervousness. "Morning," she said casually. "Sleep well?" I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak, my throat suddenly tight. Diana busied herself making a cup of tea, the silence between us growing thicker, more charged, by the second. Finally, she turned to face me, her teacup cradled in her hands. "About last night," she began, and my heart rate spiked. "I hope you don't feel uncomfortable." I shook my head quickly. "I'm not uncomfortable. Just surprised." Diana's smile softened, a look of genuine relief washing over her features. "It wasn't planned, Miles, if that's what you're thinking. It just happened." We talked for a while, a stilted, awkward conversation that carefully skirted the heart of the matter. Diana assured me that Aubrey and Tessa were discreet, that what had happened in the hot tub would remain between the four of us. She also made it clear that while she didn't regret what had happened, she would understand if I wanted to pretend it had never occurred. But did I want to pretend it had never happened? As the days passed, I found myself thinking about that night more and more. The way Diana had touched my shoulder, the sound of their shared laughter, the intoxicating, overwhelming feeling of their collective closeness. It was all seared into my memory, a permanent, indelible brand. A week went by, and things on the surface seemed to return to normal. Diana and I fell back into our usual, easygoing routine, with no further mention of that night. But there was a new undercurrent of tension now, a charged, unspoken energy that hadn't been there before. We were both acutely aware of it, of the invisible line we had crossed together. "Can we speak?" she asked one afternoon, her voice soft as she appeared in the doorway of my room. I nodded, closing my laptop as she came in, and sat on the edge of my bed. She was wearing a silky crimson robe, and I couldn't help but remember how she had looked that night in the hot tub, her skin glistening in the moonlight. "I've been thinking about that night," she said, her voice low, intimate, "and I was wondering if maybe you'd like to talk more." Just the two of us this time. My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. Diana moved closer, her hand resting gently, tentatively, on my knee. "If you're comfortable with it, just us." I knew I should say no. I knew I should erect a boundary, re-establish the proper order of things. But the memory of her eyes, the look of profound, almost sorrowful understanding, it was too much to resist. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word a quiet surrender. "Let's see where it goes." We stayed up late that night, not in the hot tub, but curled up on the living room couch, a single lamp casting a warm, intimate glow. We didn't do anything physical, but we held each other in a silence that spoke louder than any words. It wasn't just physical. We talked for hours about the past, about the future, about our fears, our hopes, our shared loneliness in this big, empty house. Over the next few weeks, Diana and I settled into a new, secret routine. We maintained our normal roles during the day, stepmother and stepson. But at night, behind closed doors, we shared a deep, profound connection that defied easy definition. It wasn't just physical, though that aspect of our relationship was tender and exploratory. It was emotional, personal, intensely intimate. We had become each other's confidence, each other's sanctuary. One night as we lay on the couch, tangled in a comfortable embrace, Diana propped herself up on an elbow and looked at me, her expression serious. "I need to ask you something, Miles." I responded with a questioning look, noticing the hesitant, almost fearful tone in her voice. "How would you feel about including others again?" I blinked, surprised. Like Aubrey and Tessa?" Diana nodded, her gaze searching mine. "They've been asking about you. They enjoyed that night as much as we did." I took a moment to consider, a complex mix of jealousy and a strange, thrilling curiosity swirling within me. "We don't have to," she said quickly, sensing my hesitation. "I'm perfectly happy with just us. But variety can be enjoyable at times." I pulled her close, kissing her softly, possessively. "You're always my number one," I whispered against her lips. The next weekend, Aubrey and Tessa came over again. Diana called it a private party. This time, the nervous, uncertain energy from that first night was gone, replaced by something warmer, more comfortable, more intentional. The evening unfolded into something none of us had anticipated, layered with an even deeper intimacy and a shared sense of discovery. The weeks turned into months, a strange, intoxicating summer of secret connection. Diana and I remained the core, the anchor of the relationship, our bond growing stronger, deeper with each passing day. Aubrey and Tessa joined us occasionally, bringing with them an electric, playful excitement, but never replacing the profound, central connection I shared with Diana. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of jealousy, of fear, of profound anxiety. What if someone found out? What if my father came home unexpectedly? What if these complex, interwoven feelings changed, soured, imploded? But we navigated it all by talking openly, honestly, laying our fears and insecurities bare. One memorable night after Aubrey and Tessa had left, Diana and I were curled up on the couch, the house silent around us. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling slightly. My heart skipped a beat. I think I'm falling in love with you, Miles." A profound, overwhelming sense of relief flooded me. "Diana," I said, cupping her face in my hands. "I think I've been in love with you for a while now." We stayed close that night, speaking of a future we knew was impossible, a future people wouldn't understand. But in that moment, we were determined to try and make it work. As summer gave way to fall, we settled into our new normal. In the eyes of the outside world, we were still stepmother and stepson. But in private, we shared a complex, deeply loving connection we had never expected. One crisp autumn evening, we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in breathtaking colors. "You know," Diana said with a soft, contented smile, "I never imagined that one night in the hot tub would lead to all of this." I laughed, pulling her close, inhaling the familiar, comforting scent of her hair. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I reflected on the whirlwind journey of the past few months. It had been a tumultuous, confusing, exhilarating journey of self-discovery, of forbidden connection, and of a strange, unexpected, all-consuming love. I didn't know what the future held for us, but as I held Diana in my arms, I knew one thing with an unshakable certainty. Whatever came our way, we would face it together. When boundaries are blurred by loneliness and longing, where does a heart find its true north? The lines we draw for ourselves are often the first to wash away in the storm of genuine connection. Thank you for joining me on this complicated journey. If this story made you feel something, please give it a like and subscribe. And I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Can a connection that starts in such a complicated way ever lead to true, lasting happiness?